All right, welcome everyone to the how to do peer review, some intro to peer review, and maybe thinking about some things that you haven't thought of before. We have some folks in the room who have done a lot of peer review before and been peer reviewed before, like Josh Leposki, who's a co-author and colleague and professor and things. And then we have some of you who haven't done it ever before, ever. So we'll try and deal with that audience. I'm going to just talk for like maybe 20 minutes, and then we'll workshop some things. And I've put together a bundle of an example of a peer review that's annotated and a peer review template where you just like type into the template and it leads you through different parts of a peer review. And I will share those in the chat now. And wherever this video ends up, I'll share it there too, hopefully. Oh, yep, that's the right one. Okay. So you don't need to look at that now, but it's there for you when you want it. All right, so first of all, there are a bunch of different types of peer review. I'm going to introduce some of them because some of them overlap, and then some of them really don't overlap. And we'll focus in. So there's something that I called colleague review, where your peer is your colleague. So me and Josh, for instance, Dr. Leposki and Dr. Liboiron, and I say, hey, Josh, can you read this for me before I send it to anyone else? And when you do that, you have to be really clear what you want, because who knows? I probably won't ask Josh for copy editing, but there's a whole lot of other things I could ask from him. Advisor review is specifically for students, postdocs, research assistants, and employees, because your supervisor determines your next steps. And especially for students, some of the struggle in that peer review is learning even through emotions, but also how do you compromise between what your advisor wants and what you want when they don't line up, which also you have to do in regular, like publication peer review. I'm going to mostly focus on publication peer review, not only because that's mostly what people mean when they say peer review, but also because the way you do it is applicable to most of the other sources. The type of peer review that I think is really important to mention, but I'm not going to cover, is adjudication. So it's a type of peer review I do mostly, which, well, I do a lot of advisor peer review too, but reviewing for grants, promotion, tenure, job applications, basically scarce competitive opportunities. And it's very, very different because fairness and comparison are really acute in those in a way that they are not as acute in these other modes. But I wanted to flag it because it's such a different genre that a lot of what I'll be talking about in these other types of peer reviews will not always be applicable to adjudication. So I just wanted to flag that in case someone comes across that as an early career researcher and they're like, oh, the skills I learned here, I can just pop it over here. No, a little bit yes, but mostly no. So I just wanted to flag that as a thing. So colleague review. You have to be really clear what you want, because as a colleague, you're probably showing something, like you're showing your dirty laundry to someone. So you have to be really, it's going to be a mess. So probably I think the most common thing is like, I'm stuck. What, I don't know where I'm going. What do you see? Do you see any nuggets? Do you see a direction? Can you give me a hand? Does this make sense? Happens a lot. So when someone is working out a theory, mostly, they want to see if it's going. Is the argument flowing is a way to talk, I think, about writing conventions and genres. So that's often when someone's trying to do something really tricky and they're not sure whether the chunks fit together, or maybe they're doing an experimental writing thing, or they have problems with organization, which is very common as a writing issue. That's what that is. Do you think it'll get published? Why and why not? Sometimes that's like, hey, Josh, you've published in this journal before. I haven't. Is this a thing that'll fit? Might happen. Or it might just be like, can you be a really nice reviewer, and before I put this somewhere, just give me the down low so I don't hurt myself. What do you think my advisor will say? I'll talk about that more in a minute, but advisors say the same 7 things over and over again. And if you talk to your cohort colleagues, they can probably tell you what those 7 things are. So actually we can do some of that now. So Josh, what are the things you say to like almost every student when they hand you a draft of things?
What's the logical link between the point you're making here and the evidence that you're marshaling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the stakes of this?
Yeah.
What is this a case study of?
Yes.
Please use regular conventions for fill in the blank.
Yeah. Or, how how do I phrase this? You know, like imagine writing for someone who doesn't already know all this stuff. You're
Yeah,
deep in it. Everything seems obvious to you,
yeah,
but everyone who's reading this, that's not the case. So
yeah.
you have to try to
Explain it to me.
anticipate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then the other one, especially for students, is don't give me the chronology of how you figured this out.
right.
Tell it to me like I'm an audience member. Yeah. So Sam just put, Sam, who is my PhD student, just put in the thing, oh my God, this is so familiar. Yes, because literally every advisor says this to every student. So if you show this your drafts to someone else in the cohort, they can provide some of that for you, and then you will amaze your advisor.
That's
Right. So yeah. So colleague review also means your peer cohort, no matter what stage of academic or research you're on. And maybe copy edits, but maybe not. Copy editing is grunt work. You normally, so you might, if you've got ESL issues, if you've got grammar issues, asking a cohort person might, or a colleague person might be good for that. But usually you don't ask people to make copy edits for you because it's very grunty work. And often there are things like writing centers. In journals, there are professional copy editors. So usually there's third parties dedicated to copy editing. So I just want to flag that if you're expecting copy editing, just note that that means you're expecting grunt work. Now, the thing is, a lot of these things are also valid for peer review. This also happens in like quote unquote real peer review, like academic peer review. What do you see? I'll talk a little bit about being a mirror. Your job as a peer reviewer is to be a mirror. Does this make sense? Does this theory go? Does this argument flow? And do you think it'll get published, and why or not is the thing, right? So there's a lot of doubling up, and a lot of these do double up. And so when I'm showing you some of the skills and techniques and norms of peer reviewing, a lot of them are applicable to what I'll be talking about. Advisor review, the things I think, one of the things I didn't put here, but I think is still true from the last one, is ask when you give something to your advisor, no matter what kind of advisors they are, asking them for a particular type of review is really helpful. Here's my chapter, okay, bye, is not as helpful as here's my chapter. Can you draft? Can you really pay attention to the flow of the argument? Yes, and also these other things. Advisors almost care about how do we get you to pass, which means we care about what's missing or unformed, because that won't get past other forms of peer review. You need to perform your expertise in certain ways, so we're looking for that, and so that sort of gets done up a lot. Something that I think not all advisors remember is pointing out a lot what is strong. A lot of students don't know what they're good at yet, and they can abandon what they're good at in the face of dealing with things that they're not as good at because no one told them it was good. So, and that's the same for peers. I think a lot of us think about like the emotional labor and being kind during peer review, but this is actually legit peer review. Telling someone what's strong means that they won't abandon it, and it means that they can build on it. And you, as a peer reviewer, you can tell them how to build on it or reflect back how they might build on it. Advisors are all about telling you what the bigger picture, or making you sort of move towards the stakes in the bigger picture. And again, maybe copy edits, but maybe not. Depends on the advisor. You've asked your advisor to do grunt work. Some of us, mostly this is gendered, I've noticed when I've looked at other advisors' feedback, but going to the writing center goes back to sort of colleague review. You might want to try that. Again, a lot of this is also the same with academic publication peer review. How do you get published? What is missing or unformed? This is probably the most common types of critiques, I would say, in an academic, like a publication peer review. What is strong is also same way, often left out. And what are the stakes and biggest picture is almost always asked by publishers of peer reviewers to comment on. Like, what is this piece going to do in the field? Like, it's a question on almost every peer review I've ever done. And so if we can't tell that, or that's not explicitly stated in the piece, that's going to be part of peer review. In the workshop, we can talk a little bit more about learning when you have big feelings and how to do compromises when your advisor is like, you must do this, and you're like, no. How to deal with that, we can workshop some of that, but I'm not going to put all that on tape. Also, I think it's a lot of it is quite advisor specific. The thing is, you do have wiggle room, and learning how to learn when you learning from someone you really hate right now, or learning when you're under duress is a very important life skill, and you get to practice it during grad school. So that's great. But not at all how I felt in grad school. So, all right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about publication peer review and those skills and those sorts of things, because they're applicable to the wider bunch. Before I go though, any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? Josh.
I was just going to add one quick thing, and if it may be very obvious to everyone, but on that grunt work piece, if folks aren't already using the read aloud functions of pretty much any modern word processor, it is super helpful because computers can only read what's there, and my brain anyway will skip over errors and all that kind of stuff. I'm reading in the midst of editing my next book, which is due next week, and it's being read back to me, and it's like, but it's the only way I would catch stuff, because it's beyond the spell check and the grammar and all that kind of stuff. So, oh, there's a missing word. Oh, that's, it's were with an apostrophe, not WER. Anyway, yeah.
And all the copy and paste victims, like all the places where you copy and pasted 17 million times because it's so edited and it skips over. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's a really good trick. And yeah, it means you can give your grunt work to something that doesn't also require emotional labor, which is great. There are folks who do enjoy copy editing, but also presses have copy editors and they get paid for that. So FYI. So I think this is a very helpful quote. It's from someone who works in a writing program. And he says, as a peer reviewer, your job is not to provide answers. And this is often where crappy peer reviewers make their appearances, when they're like, well, here's what you should do. That's not peer review. By the way, Josh, your sound is off. I love the commentary and the hmms. It makes me sound very smart, but just in case you don't want them. Your job is to reflect back you raise the questions, you reflect things back, and the writer makes the choices. So you sort of make things available so that they can make a choice. Telling someone they suck is not a choice. Telling someone that this is an issue and here's where they see strengths and weaknesses, that is the ground for a choice. So acting as a mirror is really helpful, because as Josh sort of indicated, at a certain point of editing, you just can't see the thing anymore. And so acting as a mirror is actually really important. It's also really hard. So I'm going to go through a couple of steps of how these steps, how to mirror, are actually like the cultural black box of publishing peer review. There's actually a genre and a format to how you do a review for a publisher. And no one tells you this. So I will tell them to you. And I've also, in that little bundle, I've made a template that explains all these things, and also has a template where it's like, okay, it's time for the reviewer abstract. So the reviewer abstract is literally, I call it the reviewer abstract. I don't know what its name is, but the first part of any academic peer review for a publication is you say what the piece was about. As a reviewer, here's what I think the piece did. This piece looks at the ingestion rates of plastic in both seal and char in Nunatsiavut, and finds an extremely low and unexpected rate, which the authors think came about because of X, Y, and Z. This is important from my perspective as a reviewer, because here's how I think it'll impact the field. Basically, it's a paragraph where as if you were writing the abstract for the piece. This does a couple of things. Number one, it shows you read the frickin' thing, because not all reviewers do. Number two, it tells the authors what their piece actually looks like. Because again, you can have all the intent you want in the world in your writing. That doesn't mean that's what's on the page to be picked up. Number three, if it's real good and you get a review like this, you can copy and paste that shit right into your own abstract. If you do a good job, this abstract should be better than the abstract you wrote as the writer, because you have all this baggage as the writer, while this person just read the whole thing and is like, oh, here's what was there. So this should be quite good. Sometimes it's 2 paragraphs. Sometimes it has different chunks, but it should absolutely look like an abstract for the piece. It is not, there should be no judgment in it whatsoever. So whether you're rejecting the piece because it was the worst thing you've ever seen, or whether you're saying it's published without edits, both of which are very rare, the abstract should look the same in both cases. It might be a little shorter if it was a horrible piece, but yeah, there's no judgment. Step 2, which can be part of the abstract, but should be very specifically stated, and I usually put this, actually, I usually put it in the abstract, but it needs to be there, is you need to articulate what you think the author's goals are, because this is what leads to the rest of your review, because your job is to help the authors meet their goals, which means you need to articulate that front and center. So if the authors are trying to just, I'm thinking of a paper we're about to write, if they just want to report a baseline, great, here's all the standards for reporting a baseline. But if in reporting the baseline, they're trying to emphasize that low ingestion rates in animals do happen, and it's actually really important for food sovereignty, which is what our goal is going to be on this paper, that will lead to a very different kind of paper and a very different kind of editing and peer review. A lot of people, graduate students, Sam, who's here, asked for this workshop. And one of the things she said that she and other people were interested in learning about is how do you do the positive feedback, but just don't blow happiness smoke up someone's skirt, although that doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world. But if you just really show that you see people, you will accomplish that, right? Just to be like, I see what you're after and I am invested in helping you get after that is better than flattery. And in a little while, I'll talk about identifying strengths, which is not flattery. It's part of peer review and it's part of critique, actually. So, all right. Part 3, not everyone does this. I always do this, and it's because of my training and my commitments, my political commitments. What kind of mirror are you anyway? Another way to think of this is, what is your position statement as a reviewer? In blind peer review, you can't share too much information. You can't identify yourself, but I always put in the things that matter to my expertise and my standpoint and my politics that matter to how I do a review. So I reviewed something the other day that was like, well, it actually matters that I'm Métis to this. It matters a lot because this is all about Indigenous people written by a non-Indigenous person. So FYI, when I take you to task, this is why it looks a little bit like that. And we'll probably take some sting out. Also, here's what my expertise is. Here's what my expertise isn't. So like I often I peer review scientific papers where I do not know how to do the statistical models. So I'm like, I can peer review this and this part of the stats. I did not peer review this part of the stats. And the editors really need to know that too. So this is usually just a few lines, like 3 sentences tops for me, but I always include it. I have had one editor before redact a lot of this thing because it was really important that it be blind peer review and they thought there was too much information, and they were probably right. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it, that if it's blind and you want to maintain blindness. Also, just because a peer review is blind doesn't mean you have to maintain blindness. Gay Hawkins, who is a well-known discard studies person, told me and everyone else at a conference that she doesn't do blind, and she always signs her reviews now. And she said that keeps her way more honest. And I did it for a while, and I realized there were a couple of peer reviews I definitely wasn't going to sign my name on. But the practice of doing it did actually mean I did better peer reviews for a while, like better in terms of emotional labor and evenness. It tightens some of that up. So it's something to consider. You don't have to do it. I'm just saying, what if you did sign your name to it? What would you edit? Oh, maybe you should edit that anyway. All right. So one of the things when you're doing any kind of peer review, it's very important not to make a list of all the shitty things. Shitty things and good things. Don't just make a list. You need to prioritize the things that must happen in the paper, and there should probably only be 2 of them, genre-wise. Like, so I think the example I give, in the bundle of peer review stuff, I take 3 different peer reviews I've done and I mush them into one example and annotate it. So you can see what I'm doing in each stage. And I think the priority for that one was, there's a lot of good stuff here, but there isn't a central argument. And then I said, here's what I think the central arguments might look like. Here are the strengths I see in the paper that I could see the authors moving towards. Just suggestions. You don't have to do it, but you do definitely need a central argument. And after that, other things like this word choice and that word choice, and you didn't cite this person and all that kind of stuff kind of fall by the wayside, because once they have that major issue addressed, a lot of other things will change, right? And the other thing you don't want to do is give your authors moving goalposts. So let's say you need to do this, 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 and this, and they do this, 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 and this, and you'd be like, oh yeah, but actually that fourth thing was the most important, and you only kind of did it, and the other stuff I would have let you go through peer review. Like I would have said, go ahead and get published anyway, but you didn't. So by prioritizing things and giving them a narrative and sort of if you think of it like a problem statement, they can't solve a problem that you haven't really well defined. And so you really define the problem as a genre of problem, as opposed to a list of where that problem shows up. So not the symptom, but the thing that you think is behind the symptom. So for instance, I've seen symptoms like, and this is Indigenous studies papers, there are very few Indigenous people cited. The word Indigenous is not capitalized. It says Indigenous instead of naming nations when it's regional or specific. Everything is in English, including place names in a place that I know is Indigenous territory. Those are a list of symptoms for genre saying the author needs to become more acquainted with the norms of writing in Indigenous studies. Here's Indigenous elements of style and this other book that I would highly recommend. And until you can do this, a lot of your analysis will not actually be nuanced enough to pass peer review. Thanks, good luck. Really hope you can nail it. And you do try and move them towards that goal. That's a slightly harsh example. It is one I have written before, but it was longer than that and with more details and more support. But same deal, like try and figure out what the genre of the problem is, the most important genre, and then give them that. And this it should be a problem with them reaching their goal, right? And then the second most important thing, there shouldn't be more than two, otherwise it's not priorities. And if there are two major genres of edits that need to happen, everything else after that will change anyway. You still need to tell people about the other sorts of things, because again, you don't want to be like, oh, you solved those two things. By the way, you've come through a second round of peer review. You still can't do it because there's this third thing. So you still have to mention it, but you do narrate it as been like, look, these are the two big things. Maybe one big thing, maybe there's not one, but there shouldn't be more than two, in my opinion. So the way that I format mine, so publishers always have a list of things they ask the peer reviewer. I always do, what is the most important thing? What is the second most important thing? And then I just copy and paste all the reviewer comments or questions and fill them in. Because for two reasons. Number one, sometimes the publisher comments don't catch the most important thing. So the example I gave, like, I don't think you're ready to publish in Indigenous studies yet. You need to learn some of the basic norms of publishing here first, because it's leaking everywhere. That often won't get captured in like, what is the significance to the field, right? Or something like that, which is one of the questions publishers often ask. Also, it's much faster. See above, yes, see above, no, see above. Yeah, so and it also makes sure that someone's peer review doesn't get fudged up because you didn't ask everything the publisher needed. It also helps the editor figure out how to deal with your peer review, because let's say the two most important things doesn't actually matter to the journal. And they're not Indigenous studies journal and they don't care about Indigenous people and they really want the data. So whatever, that is something that can happen to your peer review. So making sure that you do both of these things is important. Say goodbye in your peer review. Sounds like if you just do the peer and then the questions, and the last question was, I don't know, do you think people in other fields would read this? Yes. And then the review ends. I mean, you're talking to a person. It's a letter to a person. The author will get a full copy pasted thing that you give them. I always say goodbye. My goodbye is often, and also because, and I think this is something that Sam and the other people who asked for this, even if you get a good peer review, there will still be some probably criticisms of your work, and there's some feelings that go with this. If someone just leaves, you usually hang on to the shittiest of those feelings. Saying goodbye can help tip that a bit so that the author reads the review better, which is what you want as a reviewer, right? So saying, hey, I know there's some changes here, but I really want you to meet the goals. There's a bunch of things over there that maybe you change, but I don't think you need to because it doesn't matter to your goal. But those two things I think you really need. I wish you all the best in your revisions. And I look forward to reading and teaching this one day. That wasn't so hard, was it? Or I think there's a lot of potential here. I don't think this is ready for publication for the following reasons, but I do see the author's commitment. I commend them on it, and I hope I see this in other form once it's ready. Great. Lie if you have to. Ask ChatGPT to write it for you, but there's no reason to kick someone in the teeth on your way out, right? So just saying goodbye, don't ghost. This is another when people ask about like, well, how do you not say gratuitous good things? Saying just plain old saying goodbye and having an exit is a way to see the author, be like, yes, I know there's someone reading this. I see you. I too write things and have feelings about the things I write. Okay, bye. Yeah. So yeah. Questions, comments, thoughts about that stuff? I'm going to get into some more practical. Oh, niggly wiggly. Excusez-moi. All right. So I think this one I have to hide my big face for. Yep. All right. So when you're doing a peer review, there are different ways to read a peer review. A lot of people will say you should read the whole thing once and then go back and then do your peer review. I don't know what kind of time those people have, but that is highly recommended. I usually do a combination. I do a skim, then I do the review read, then I read my own review, and then I'm done. Unless something's really, really hard, like it has a really heavy review, then I'll have to read it a few times. FYI. But there are different ways to do the actual reading. One of the ways I always do it, because I'm a methodologist and because a lot of papers I review are methodology papers or are papers with well, mostly on Indigenous folks. I read a lot of those papers, which means that I pay a lot of attention to methods. And so when you're doing that, you're reading for whether their methods support their findings. So this is what Josh was talking about even in the student review. Do your methods result in the data properly that you say you have? And do the data support the things that you're saying about it? So that would be a methodological read. It's also where ethics go. So I do a lot of reading for ethics because that's my jam. What almost everyone does is actually very few people do close readings of the arguments in terms of how the text is making its arguments, which I wish they did more of. So is this genre of writing working for your argument? Are the terms of art you're using working for your argument? Are these vocabularies and grammars and the way you've organized this making the argument for you? Or is the way that you've done subheadings actually taking away from your argument? Does the type of citations you're doing, are they actually supporting it? So this is where one of my most common review comments are, you're talking about Indigenous knowledge erasure. Why don't you cite any Indigenous people? That seems like Indigenous knowledge erasure. So it means that the way they're making their argument is going against their argument, right? It's a pretty nuanced way to do peer review and to read for something, but it's also my favorite way. Constructive means identifying how the argument is supported and elaborated. Most people do this kind of thing. So this is what Josh was talking about. Is the argument supported by your data? I don't quite believe you. Or you have to add something before I'm willing to believe you, or something like that. That's very common for peer review. And then deconstructive is what bad peer review looks like. I don't think doing deconstructive is bad. I think only doing deconstructive is bad. And that means this is what is often called critique. It's also very dude bro nasty core, or it can be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. But when nastiness happens in academia, it's mostly an aggressive deconstructive reading, which means looking for the inconsistencies, the contradictions, the incoherence, the gaps, the bad stuff that will just period, usually from sometimes the bad reviewer's desires. But when you're a good peer reviewer and you deconstructive is like, well, there are certain things that interrupt or weaken the author's goals. So some inconsistencies, so this might be a spicy take, but it's okay if some things are shitty in a publication. It's okay if there's gaps, small gaps. It's okay if there's some inconsistencies. It's okay if this chunk over here kind of dangles, as long as the author's goals are being met and it makes sense, right? And methodologically it flows, right? As long as the standards are met. Yeah. Does it matter if every single one of these is nailed? I don't think so. So yeah. So what you want to avoid is and I think that's why everyone's in this room, is what we don't like and what we want to avoid is a list of this stuff, as opposed to sort of a narrative crafted from these different reads about how these things meet the author's goals or not. Prioritized. Does that make sense? Okay, and if you're like, ooh, that was helpful, I take this from, these reading methods are from Joel Dumit's How I Read, which is actually a little blog post for graduate students for how to read texts in general, but they're really handy for peer review as well. All right. Yeah, I think there's other ways we can talk about qualities of good and bad peer reviews. I think there are different tips and tricks. A lot of them are in the templates, so we can go through the templates if we want to after this. But I do want to do a special thing, nugget focus on what happens when you get reviewer 2. Reviewer, I mentioned in my book, Pollution is Colonialism, reviewer 2, and it's being translated into French right now. And the translator was like, who is reviewer 2? What is his name? I'm like, oh no, he's a character. It just means jerk. It means a reviewer who is a jerk, who gives you the nastiest reviews. Let me explain. So apparently it's not a universal term, but reviewer 2 means when you get a review that is nasty. Chances are good when you get a review that is nasty, that it is nasty. It's probably not you. It's probably the review. Sometimes no, but often yes. So the first thing to notice is that you are not your work. If someone criticizes your work, regardless of whether your work deserves it or not, it actually has nothing to do with you as a person, you as a scholar, you as a human, you as a valuable whatever. And this might seem really obvious. It's also really hard to fix. Oh, just don't take it personally. It's really hard to fix. And where I noticed this is when I did my PhD, the first time we did a cohort critique, everyone thought I was a horrible monster. And they're like, how could you say that? And they were very, what I thought were very benign, factual, methodological things that were easy to fix. And people were like, how could you say that to someone? Because I had just done 2 degrees in art where you get critiqued every week in New York City, and you learned very fast that you were not your work, or you died or dropped out. Like those were the options. And so it was very easy. I learned very easily to separate myself from my work, but it's not actually that common. if you can remember that feelings aren't facts and that reviews aren't facts, maybe that will help. I don't know what'll help. But FYI, they're not synonymous. The hardest thing to do with a nasty reviewer 2 is take him, and I will gender it because it is a highly gendered activity. Doesn't mean a man's doing it, but it is gendered. Very macho, very overbearing, very controlling, usually. You still have to take them seriously as a reviewer. You still have to learn from them, and you still have to consider them as a potential audience member and expert in your field. And that's why they were called as a reviewer. You don't have to take everything they say. And so your job becomes, how do you sort out the jerk from the colleague who might be, so I had a student who sent me a review being like, I got a reviewer tour. And they totally had a reviewer 2. But reviewer 2, they mentioned something about an indigenous term of art. I forget what it was. Something like, that even people who were immigrants or refugees to Canada were still uninvited, right? Or can still fall into the category of settler as uninvited. And the reviewer was ready to flip the table. And they're like, no, I invited them. I sponsored my family, or like whatever it was. And so my advice to that person was, yeah, that person is highly reactive and you picked a button, but also they probably are completely unaware that this is a term of art. And so you have to teach them the term of art and sort of couch it. And so that someone can be like, oh, I guess that is uninvited. in terms of like indigenous invitation from a nation, yeah, that's true. They never got invited, but yeah, okay, fine. So their revision was actually very beautifully done. But they did have to sort out the knee-jerk aggressive reaction of reviewer two from the very real problem where reviewer two was very unfamiliar with something, was interpreting it in a different way than intended, as probably were other people. Yeah, and sometimes you can ignore it. Sometimes they are just being a jerk and there's nothing else underneath. You probably need a third party to help you suss some of that out, especially in your early reviews. If someone is actually violent, that is not your problem. That is the editor's problem. So that's what abuse rolls uphill. If someone is actually being racist, sexist, transphobic, whatever, xenophobic in any way, abusive, violent, that means you have a bad editor who didn't read it before they sent it to you. And that is the editor's job. And it is also the editor's problem to deal with that reviewer. In this example I just talked about, where the person was like, we're not uninvited, or so-and-so's not uninvited, the editor actually did pad the letter to the authors being like, yeah, reviewer two, and actually this guy was actually the second reviewer. Yeah, reviewer two is, I forget what they said. They didn't say this, but like is a little sensitive, but I think you should look at the, whatever. And so the editor was aware. The person who got the review didn't read into that in the editor's letter. And I had to point to it. I'd be like, yeah, the reviewer knows that this guy has some limitations as a reviewer, but is also saying there's a valuable nugget there, which I also agreed with, if you can get past the sort of defensiveness of that reviewer. But if someone is just violent, kick it back to the editor and be like, is this how you do business? Like, this is your problem. Please let me know how you want to proceed. And they do have an editorial problem because an editor should never let that go out. But it happens sometimes. And then finally, no matter how good or bad your first set of reviews are, always bring them to mentors, where a mentor is not necessarily synonymous with supervisor, someone you trust, someone who understands the politics of what you're writing about, for a check about norms. So they'll help you figure out whether a reviewer is gaslighting you, whether a reviewer is actually an expert in the field, or whether they got called on for some other reason, a topic expert or something like that. If they don't follow some of those things, like starting the first paragraph with like, this is what this text does. They can be like, well, it might be a ChatGPT review. It might be a fraudulent review. It might be someone who didn't read you carefully. You can ignore this. You can't ignore this. No, this is totally normal. I had a student once who was like, oh, I got a review. And I was like, oh, what did it say? And they were like, oh, it said this and this. And I was like, show it to me. And it said, and the ruling on it was, this should be published without edits. And I was like, this never happens. Why are you sad? And they're like, there are 3 things, and one of them is a sign. And I was like, dude, these are optional. And they're just click the send it in button. You're done. Go have a party. I don't understand. And this was just because he didn't know the norms, that no one gets published without edits. And that it was actually the biggest party it's probably the last time he'd ever have it in his career. He was a PhD student, and he got several awards for the paper. So, and rightfully so. So just doing like a culture check with someone who's published a lot and that you trust can be super useful. And congratulations, you're now a peer reviewer. You're done. You've got training. That's way more training than most people get. I do want to go a little bit through the templates that I prepared for folks. But before we do that, any questions, comments, concerns? Any particular reasons that you're here that we haven't addressed yet? Some of you look very thoughtful. I appreciate that. Okay, we're still in the drinking out of the fire hose phase. Oh, are you making a face, Paul? Do you have a thing? You don't. So disappointed. All right. So I am going to screen share with you as soon as it loads. Come on, Excel. My Excel is so tired. It's been working so hard. A template. Here we go. Here it is. Yes, I did this in Excel. Yes, that is a legitimate place to make templates. So this template, basically, if you have to do a peer review, you can just yoink this template and use it, fill it in if you want. and it has instructions of this sort of stuff. It's for beginner folks. Although if you're not a beginner folk, you can absolutely still use it. And it's like a nice cheat sheet. It does have this how to read a peer review. And it does have some characteristics, with a missing eye, of a strong peer review that I haven't talked about. Some of them are obvious. The role of emotional labor in peer review, it has to be constructive. Comment should be specific, like the second paragraph on page 5. I didn't understand how the section related back to the case, as opposed to the middle was unclear, or something like that. Actionable, like if you're actually supporting the author to meet their goals, you have to be specific enough that they can use your input to meet their goals. The middle was unclear is fundamentally unhelpful and is really just a diss. So it's quite bad peer review. If you don't understand, and this is especially true for junior people, you've been selected as a peer reviewer because you are a key audience member and colleague, no matter how junior. So if you didn't understand something, you need to be like, this is unclear, I didn't understand it. Can you walk me through this? Or I didn't understand this part. That is very much part of your job. You shouldn't be like, oh, maybe it's me. It is not you. Yeah. We talked about prioritization. We talked about your job is to support the author, not make the author's work conform to your beliefs. Sometimes you will come across, and this happens to me quite a bit actually. Sometimes I read a paper where I fundamentally disagree with the theory or thesis. It's my job to make sure the author has provided enough evidence that I could feasibly change my mind, even if I'm pretty sure I won't, as opposed to being like, you don't agree with me, you can't go. You don't get to pass go. So yeah. And this is the reason I pulled this up. Reread your comments before you pass them out. So it's actually sort of like writing an email in anger. You've written a letter in judgment. It'll sound judgy. So, because that's what you've done, you've adjudicated. And so one of the things is I reread usually I make a bunch of notes and then I start another document and I start the review because my notes sound so harsh. And also now that I write them to myself, they are harsh. And then I do the translation work. And then usually the next day I reread them. And now that I'm not in the text, I fundamentally edit usually. This has probably been the best part of emotional labor and actual supportive peer reviewing that I've ever done, the most important step. Sometimes people now thank me for my peer reviews and they definitely didn't before. So yeah, it's my personality. All right, back to sharing this template, this juicy, lovely template. After that, it's basically what I talked to, the different stages of being a mirror. Oh, look, here's your reviewer summary. Oh, look, here's your position statement as a reviewer. Oh, look, here's your, this also has like, what's your main message to reviewer? This is a great piece with a lot of potential. It needs 2 things changed. This piece is amazing. To really nail it, this one thing I think needs to be addressed. Whatever that is. This is also a really good place to put people's strengths. This part of the piece is really strong and it needs to be built on because this other part isn't carrying it. Whatever the like bumper sticker version is. Here's your revision top priority. Here's your second priority. Here's your journal specific questions. One of the things I didn't talk about is what I call optional revisions. So this is often where I will put, why wasn't this cited? One of the worst reviewer 2 things is like, you must cite this or you might not pass go. That's not great. That's like, if I wrote this is what I would do. You should not review like that. But there's often like, hey, if you haven't cited this, maybe you don't know about it, and it's really on your topic. And you might be interested in this in terms of your career. It's not going to keep you from getting through the gates, but you should, I am doing my duty making you aware of it. You may now do choices, right? So again, this is all about, if we go back to what peer review is about, and it's about not making decisions for people, but letting them like have choices. Hey, here's some stuff you might want to read. I have done reviews about this text is missing to be like, so this is your topic. There's a whole body of literature on an identical topic that's making very similar arguments, and it's not here. if you could just motion that you're aware of it and then say why you're not addressing it, that will help me as a reviewer understand that you know about it and there's a reason you're not engaging with it. And that's my sneaky way of saying, you probably don't know about it, do you? Maybe they do, but often they don't. I specialize in a lot of junior, like peer review for junior scholars at the presses I work with. So often they've moved into an area and they're just not fluent in the whole thing, and it's a gentle way of doing that. Back to the template. Then then the last thing, and this will always be in the portal. Actually, you don't need to see this. The template doesn't have it. But when you do a peer review, it's almost always through a digital portal. And the last thing is almost always a radio button, a selection button about what your final decision is. Your final decision can be publish without revisions. That button is lonely and almost never used. Publish with minor revisions. These are like ticky little changes. If they don't happen, it'll just be like 10% worse, but it's still, basically fine. Major revisions means like this has to be rewritten. Maybe a little bit more research or analysis has to be done. There's like a major problem here, but there's also such strong potential that I don't want to kick it to the curb. And then there's don't publish. One of the things I want to emphasize for this group, for the junior folks, is that don't publish is by far the most common ruling. Do not, if this thing isn't ready to be published, it is not a kindness to put authors through 7 versions of revisions that they might never get to because there's a fundamental flaw in their data or their argument that you've been able to detect. Or there are so many problems that they should really go back and start over for this to succeed and for them to meet their goals. Or if they're like, this happens all the time because I do so much Indigenous study stuff. If they're not ready yet, if they're not good in good relations, they do need to take the time to get in good relations before they publish. That is still support and helping the author meet their goals. It's also your job to reject when necessary. If you're ever an editor in a journal, there's something called desk reject, which means the papers come through and the editors look at them first. 80% of like desk rejection, it depends on the journal, but like I'm an editor on 2 different journals, publication thingies. We do lots of desk rejection. Doesn't fit the journal, doesn't have enough, or there's some fundamental flaw. This is racist. I get to do that one a lot. So a lot of those rejections that a journal talks about, its rejection rate, happen at the editor's version. On small presses or under staffed presses, or a press that's handling a topic they don't normally topic, but it's adjacent to a topic they do handle, sometimes something should be desk rejected and it gets to you. And that's when you kick it back to the editor. So if something is, that's the like, the abuse rolls uphill sort of thing. So sometimes something should have been desk rejected and isn't. You can kick it back to the editor in that case, which is a type of rejection. Yeah. Questions, comments? Actually, before I do that, I'm going to pause the recording. All right, so we're going to workshop some stuff that you're dealing with. Sam, I saw your hand. What is up?
I have a question. Can you help fill in the picture for me? So when you do peer review for a publication, and then so I receive other people's reviews and then I address them, do those reviewers then get to see my response, or what happens at that point?
Depends on the journal. So some journals, so what's most common is no. It goes into the abyss. The editor, the reviewer never knows what happens, ever. That's the most common. The second most common is if you've put in something for major or sometimes minor, but pretty much only major revisions, the editor might say like, can we come back to you for the second round of revision? And you can say yes or no. I almost say yes, always say yes, because I signed up for it. Whenever you say you're going to do a review, maybe assume you're going to do it twice. And then you see the thing that authors write about how they address the comments. And if they've put the 2 reviewers together, you'll see that. You may or may not see the other reviewers' comments. Depends on the journal. I would say maybe it's 50-50. And then rarely, and mostly for manuscripts, for books, you'll see, especially it comes for second peer review. So like Duke University Press, doesn't matter what the first review is, there's 2 reviews. I just finished a review for Duke. Both of mine were, well, one of mine had major revisions and the second one was like, publish it now, it's amazing. And in that case, I saw the other reviewers' comments, like literally what they had, the entire thing, so that I could adjudicate that everything was addressed. And that part because Duke has one of the most robust peer review processes I've ever seen. So depends. Paul.
One thing that stood out to me was that you're sort of talking about the do not publish recommendation. And I heard that as actually a little bit of like permission to go ahead and use that box sometimes, because I have really struggled sometimes with, you put all this time into providing feedback and stuff and feel like this is not ready. Like this can't go. In other words, like if all these revisions don't get addressed, this could be potentially bad and or harmful or negative if it's published. And I'm curious, when you use that, it sounds like you're saying, and you can confirm this and answer the question, but it sounds like you're saying there's also an option in your mind sometimes, it's do not publish yet. This may still become publishable with a lot of work. And so that's what it sounded like you're saying. So I'm asking if is that the case? And then the question is, when you, in cases where you use that do not publish box, will you still provide feedback if you think that is the case? So it's do not publish yet, do a lot of work on, yeah, okay.
Absolutely, but those are my shortest, clearest reviews. Here is, you only get one priority, and it's what's breaking the bank, right? For me, it's almost always indigenous fetishism, unintentional colonialism or racism, and not enough time in the oven. Like the scholar is too junior to the topic, regardless of where they are in their career, and they bit off something more than they can chew, and they're not done in the oven yet. Like they need to spend another couple of years in that oven. And then once there was a fatal flaw in their data collection, and it wasn't a bell they'd be able to unring. I didn't think it was a bell they could unring. And so they needed to publish a fundamentally different paper out of what they had. In those cases, my review is short. It's super clear. There's only one priority. And I do more emotional labor to differentiate between a good project and an insufficient paper, assuming the project is good. If I can identify that the flaw is actually in the project instead of in the paper, I definitely do that for them. Yeah, but sometimes, especially if it's a junior scholar or someone who's junior in their journey into a topic where they just need more time in the oven, I'd be like, you have potential, you have the seed, you do not have the familiarity or fluency yet. And it's leaking everywhere. Like this isn't an edit. This is a journey, and you're too early to have published it yet. Stick with this project. I can see your commitment. Call me, like whatever. But yeah. And I actually had, this was a few years ago, there was someone who was a white settler scholar who was writing about indigenous stuff, and it was, I think they were either a PhD student or a newly minted PhD student, and that's the review I gave them. I was like, you need some more time in the familiarity. You're flipping off norms and you don't know them yet. So go look at this, go look at this, go look like this. Sit with it for a year, try again, name me as a potential reviewer. And they did, and we went through 2 rounds of review, and it's a great paper. And they emailed me to be like, I figured out who you were. Thank you. So I have a very distinctive authorial voice. It's not hard to figure out who I am. They're like, thank you so much. And they thank me in the paper as well, which they didn't ask for first. So they still need some familiarity with some of the norms in indigenous studies, but it was a good paper. Yeah. That's it. Melissa.
I was trying to find the hand emoji. I couldn't find it.
I saw your flesh hand.
I think you were going over major steps of a peer review. And in the first step, you mentioned that sometimes if your abstract is really good and the reviewer abstract is even better. You can use or integrate that into your abstract. So I was thinking about, to what extent does that work? Can you copy things over? Do you have to reword things? And do you
Yes.
have to credit
So
the,
plagiarism still, like someone's review is still their intellectual property and they're still labor. There's actually, if you've read my book, Pollution is Colonialism, really, really carefully, I do literally quote reviewer 2, who I found out later was Candace Callison, who's a very amazing Indigenous scholar. And I do say, I literally quote them. And in the footnote, I say, thank you so much, reviewer 2. And then I cite the email that the editor sent to me with my reviews in it. Because I couldn't have, there's no way I could have put it better. It's like 3 sentences or something, or a term of art or whatever. So yeah, so you do have to choose an avenue that would be like, that respects intellectual labor, whatever that might be, significantly rewriting it, citing it, just asking permission. Sometimes we're like, oh, I don't care, whatever it is. Yeah, you don't have to ask through the editor if it's blind. Yeah. Sam.
My question or request for more discussion is around the genre of problems. So for myself, this is a skill that I want to work on with peer review. What's easier for me to pick up on is, oh, copy edits, or this kind of argument is falling flat. But I'm trying to think, to go from those almost nitpicky things, which aren't getting at the genre of problem, so that I'm trying to think of what are the different genre of problems, and then if I can name them, maybe I can recognize them and do better peer review.
Yeah, so I mean, peer review is mentoring or teaching. And so if any of you have ever mentored or taught, you know that your job as a teacher isn't like, when someone's struggling, isn't to be like, oh, you don't get it. It's to be like, why don't you get it? What is this not getting it actually a symptom of? And how do I address that so that we can get it? And that's what a peer review is too. So it is a skill. I think there are stages of a career where you should not do peer review. And if you're like, I don't yet know how to like get out of the symptoms and into the genre, then be like, I'm not going to peer review yet. And you can start doing a peer review and being like, I don't think I can do this, and you can give it back, and you should give it back. Just so you know, I get a fair number of give it backs as an editor. So yeah, it's a skill you do with practice. If you liken it to teaching and how you can do it with mentoring, and that's probably where you know whether you're good at it or not, if you also have to TA or teach or mentor. But yeah, and I think I would say, Josh, at this point, that's all you and I do with our students, is be like, oh, this is that genre of problem. Oh, there's like only 17 genres of problem. And you get to, they repeat. And sometimes they have like special inflections, but that's it. There are only 17 genres of problems. Yeah.
That's kind of comforting in a way, like, as a junior scholar, it's like, all right, I'm not uniquely terrible at anything. This is actually kind of the same learning potholes that many of us.
It's true. You are not uniquely terrible at anything. It's like that good bad marriage thing. Like, one of them are all the same. I don't remember which one it is. I'm not married, but like, yeah, anyway, I don't know where I was going with this, but like, there's not that much variety in bad scholarship in terms of like what's happened to it. There is a lot of variety in good scholarship, I would say, and that's part of what makes it good scholarship. Although there are certain characteristics, but yeah. I would say, before you publish a paper, especially if you're junior at it, give it to multiple people who have done peer reviews before. Your supervisors are your most obvious folks. But again, if you don't have good relationships with them, or you don't trust them for whatever reason, shop it around, because a lot of peer reviewing, especially for junior scholars, is, oh, you're missing some of the norms, the cultural norms of our discipline, and you can't get through the gates without them. But they're cultural knowledge. They're not a problem with your research necessarily. So yeah. And then same if you're doing one of your first peer reviews, have your mentor walk through it with you. If you have a good relationship with a mentor, they can help you fine tune seeing these sort of genre problems that you were talking about, Sam. They can be like, oh, by the way, you need to start with the paragraph of what you saw. No judgment. Don't start with judgment. Start with, this is what the thing is. You should say goodbye. you should not send this to someone. Remember, you're talking to someone with feelings. It's okay to reject things, like all those sorts of things someone can, yeah, help with. In fact, you must reject things. Once you get to adjudication, you're only allowed to pick 1 or 2 things, and there are 117 of them. Like, so yeah, that's why adjudication usually happens later in someone's career. You need a lot of practice. Anything I missed, Josh?
I was wondering about dealing with contrasting reviews, where especially in situations where you've got a review or two, and then at least one other person who's like, you know, this is great. and yet either the editor and maybe, well, okay, so full disclosure. So this was a Shirk review for me. So I didn't get my Shirk this go round. And one of the external reviews was like very much a review or two. And the other external was like, this is great. And then the committee just sort of, you know, it's like, well, we have to, as you just said, we have to reject 117
Yeah.
and only 3.
And at Shirk, if you have a split review like that, Shirk will use the quantitative
Yes.
measures.
Yeah.
And so you might not even got into a discussion.
That's right.
So, yeah. So, I mean, there are many problems with all sorts of versions of peer review. And what Josh has identified is definitely one of them. There is a thing that Shirk does, though, it was an insight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done that insight adjudications. What one of the reviewers can do is be like, oh, I saw Leposki's down there in the no bucket. I was reviewer 1 who thought this was freaking amazing. I'm dragging it into the conversation. Yeah. Shirk does allow that. It doesn't happen very rarely because they're freaking 4-hour meetings anyway, but yeah, FYI. Actually, Josh, you and I dealt with our book where we had 5 divergent reviews. It was not a strong, I would not characterize it as a strong peer review structure where you got 5 short divergent peer reviews. But the same thing, like editors believe this too, right? The writer makes the choices. The reviewers just offer the stuff, and then you chart your way through it and give reasons. And really who you're convincing is the editor. You're convincing the editor you read it, you take it seriously, and you have somehow addressed all of these, including not doing edits for specific reasons. I very often don't do edits for specific reasons, but then I will often put some of those reasons into the text. So it becomes clear to whoever is just like reviewer 2, that there's a reason for that. And it's a good reason to sort of preempt that sort of critique in the future. So it's still useful that way. I've gotten peer reviews where, you know, there are 10 things I said had to correct. I said yes to 1 of them and no to 9 of them, gave good reasons, and it was no thing. Right? Because what you don't know is where the editor comes down in the review. So very often, it's actually the editor and 2 reviewers, or sometimes 2 editors and 2 reviewers, depending on the split. So one of the journals I work for, if it's a split review and the editor wasn't sure which way to go, another editor comes in, and the editors have lots of experience doing this. And there's another journal that I've published with or submitted to, I don't remember, where it's the editor and 2 peer reviewers have the vote. So what you don't know is where the editor falls down on the different reviews, and they might already agree with you. So you might not even have to do a ton of work saying like, I thought this was a bit fishy. And so, yeah, what I would not recommend doing is saying like reviewer 2 is a racist, so I told them to F off and I'm not doing their thing. You can be like, so the comment that Indigenous people aren't really Indigenous if we use modern technology has a long history of being critiqued as fetishism in the field, cite. And so I actually didn't even address it because most of the authors or most of the readers of this journal would know that. Maybe you say that, or maybe you say, and so what I've done is cited all those pieces now in the piece. So if the person has concerns, they can go to read on their own. Right. So there's that kind of thing you can do. Yeah. And the editor's probably like, yeah, hopefully.
And I will say very quickly that the question I'm asking is around a genre that would be adjudication as opposed to journal review. So, you know, those people who may know Shirk already, they're in the insight process. You can reply to past reviews, but there's also no guarantee. In fact, it's extremely unlikely that the same people will be
Oh.
reviewing the next time you submit. So
I think the last Insight I did, there were like freaking 50 reviewers. We each got 14 different things to review. Most of us spent less than 20 minutes on each piece because it had like, it was just, so it's a lot, many forms of adjudication are like the Wild West.
yeah.
And so it is, and that's why I didn't cover in this, because it is such a different genre.
Yeah.
And it's definitely where you don't, yeah, anyway. A lot of European adjudication gets, they have their internal committees, but then they do this thing where they get an outside expert in exactly the thing, sort of like a P&T letter, honestly. I do European things a lot, where they're like, there's this one piece. Please be careful with it, like spend a lot of time on it and tell us what you think. Here are 3 questions. And then that weighs more, that gets weighted in different ways. Anyway, so yeah, there's different models out there, but yeah, you don't ever get to reply and there's no revision. So it's just a smackdown or an award letter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless I'm going to reapply to the same funding committee, I have a personal rule that I do not read the committee comments. I now use the same groups over and over again, but there's a certain point where, so NSERC is nasty. Some of those reviewers are nasty, especially to Indigenous knowledge. So I had a rule that like, unless I'm applying to this award again, I'm not going to bother to read those comments, because you can't, it's just getting smacked. Like, why would I line up for that? Getting smacked and getting something out of it, I'll consider it, but just a smack, that's a hard no. So yeah. Yeah, adjudication is harsh. So it's this, if you do adjudication, it's really important to follow some of those rules. Reread what you're doing, do the emotional labor, say goodbye, like that kind of stuff. Because they're really short with really high stakes. Publication matters a lot. Your funding for the next 5 years matters more. Yeah. Your promotion and tenure matters more. Anything else people are dealing with, wondering about, happened to a friend? Sam, you're good at this. What's up?
It's around the feelings, I guess. Like I think I'm getting better at this, but I don't want to speak for everyone, so I'll just speak for myself, you know, like first generation academia, and then there could be feelings around like, oh God, no, I really don't belong here because look what someone said about my work. So yeah.
This is Sam, who has one of the highest awards you can get in as a PhD student. So yeah, it's real. So I mean, like, so yeah, just because you're fucking amazing doesn't mean you don't have those feelings. So that's the first thing to recognize, and do not feel guilty or like you're like feeling bad because you have imposter syndrome. Elitism, like academia, is built to give you everyone some kind of imposter syndrome. Even Paul, I bet, has imposter syndrome sometimes, right? Yeah, and you're like the proto like guy conservationist guy. Like, how could you be an imposter? Like, the field was built for you. So it's everyone gets imposter syndrome. There's a few things you can do. Read the first part of the review. Don't read the rest of it for a minute. Just read the first part of the review, take a pause, then read it, then set it aside. Read it with a mentor. When you get it, don't open it. Give it to him. I have had students send me the reviews without them reading it first if they had a risky paper, particularly like in one case, it was an autoethnography of trauma. They're like, can you just read this and tell me? And then I did the thing where I was like, hey, editor, you need to call back your review or two and redo this because this is not going to the author, and PS, I've called your boss. And then there's other things where I'm like, you're going to get an award. This is an amazing paper. They think so too. So there's, yeah. So you can give it to someone else, especially if you think it's risky. I mean, try and read what's there, not where you're going with it. You will always criticize, not well, except for reviewer two, you will always criticize yourself more than a good reviewer is criticizing you. So just try and, I don't know, get therapy so you learn the skill of differentiating between those things. I don't know how you just do it. But yeah, I think the more critique you get, the easier it is to sort of like when I was talking about going through going through like two different degrees of art school, critique does not bother me at all. And I know that's quite unusual, but I also share that characteristic with architects, engineers, and artists, where we get critiqued up the yin yang during school to the point where we learn that skill. So I think the more you do it, yeah, don't read or give reviews on an empty stomach. Don't be hangry when you read them or write them. Same with grading, all the rules used for grading, when you know, like when you, all the same things. So yeah, the more you do it, and hopefully you're getting that through your advisors who are invested in your future. I know not all advisors are great advisors. And so you have at least some practice of doing that before you get to outside strangers who don't have to sign their name to something, do it for you. Yeah. Yeah. But always, for your first set of reviewers, also share them with a mentor, and they can do the norm checking for you. Like my student who was like, this is horrible. I'm like, this is the best review option I've ever seen, and I've never gotten this. So congratulations. You could stop crying if you wanted to. So yeah, it's, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and also if you're reviewing and you're angry, stop. You cannot support someone when you also want to punch them in the face. And I've had to do that more than once, especially when there's a indigenous fetishism or sort of a fluency problem where someone's accidentally reproducing colonialism and you're like, I know it's an accident. I got to come back tomorrow until I can like help you with your accidents, as opposed to like, I really would like to, this hurts, like this hurts me. I want to punch back. So yeah, so you also have to do that as a reviewer sometimes, and not always about that kind of topic. Sometimes you just get angry because someone's methods are bad. Maybe that's me, but you need to take a break. Yeah. Veronica.
I was just going to say, this is really helpful because I'm not a peer reviewer, but as somebody who's trying to write, this is so helpful for me to not be like, to maybe get those words on that paper and not worry so much about it and just do it. Well, this is very helpful for me. Especially because
you can start with colleague review. And those are almost always supportive. So yeah, because it depends on the colleague you give it to. I do not recommend give it to a colleague you already think is reviewer too, unless you want to experience that. I don't know why. Yeah, if I give something to Josh is always going to be nice to me no matter what I give him. Right? And genuinely wants me to do well. And so I should probably give my roughest, most vulnerable, whatever pieces to someone like Josh. So yeah, so you can do that before you send it off to blind review, or even like your advisor review. Although you do have two very kind advisors, but still, yeah. Just because you have kind advisors doesn't mean you think you might be hurt by them. So there's still, yeah. Especially if you care a lot about what they think of you, and what professors, what I think of your paper is not what I think of you, ever. Unless you've written something horribly racist. What I think, like intentionally racist. So professors can divide that. So if you're like, oh, I worry what my professor thinks of me, we can differentiate between your writing and who you are. So it's a life skill. Yeah. All right, anything else, or are we done?
One more question, please.
Perfect.
I was wondering, so when this is a part of your career, and I imagine you get better at it over time, but how much of your time does it take up to do the service to
as much as you give it? So I have a rule that I am only allowed to have 2 review items on my desk at any one time. They can be, I do a lot of promotion and tenure letters. That's my specialty, especially with BIPOC scientists and community-based scientists. And so I can only have 2 reviews of any kind on my desk at a time. Grants, P&T, letter of recommendation for student, peer review, student peer review, whatever. So if I've got 2 things in the hopper already and a 3rd one comes in, I will either say no, or if I really want to review it, which doesn't happen to me anymore, but once upon a time, I was interested enough to want to review things as opposed to doing it for the karma and the norms. I would say something like, well, my due dates for these 2 things is this. Can I extend your due date to here so you can be the new number 1 in the hopper? And sometimes the presses are like, oh no, that's too late. And sometimes the presses are like, yes, yes, yes. So, especially manuscripts will have longer timelines than articles. Yeah, so that's my rule. I only do 2 at a time. I'm a full professor, 2 at a time. I probably started doing that as an associate professor, is 2 at a time. Once you publish one thing, you will get requests for reviews because your email is now as a publisher in a system. So yeah, they'll load up. How many do you do, Josh?
I've sort of worked with that 3-to-1 rule, as it were, where, you know, the cartoon of having, you know, there's 3 peer reviewers for everything you send out. So for everything I send out, I review 3 things. I mean,
Yeah, that's actually quite common. Yeah.
very much a guideline. I was actually, as we were having this conversation, I was like, there's a bunch in my where, you know, because I'm finishing this book. I haven't been keeping track of my review deadlines quite so much, but also being very mindful that knowing that I'd be, you know, at this stage in getting the book finished, I was like, there's a bunch of stuff I didn't take because there's no way, there's just no way. Yeah, anyway, but maybe to a flip side of what you were saying a moment ago, Max, if it's not obvious, record what you review, like in your CV, like reviewed for whatever journal. Some people count, like they, you know, put the number of manuscripts per thing. I've never done that, but just, you know, it's a part of disciplinary service, right? And it, yeah.
And when I just finished writing someone's promotion and tenure writing, I look at that and I can make an argument about interdisciplinary expertise based on the range of journals they've reviewed for. Right? So when you do put it in your CV, you do not put the year. You definitely don't put the title of the thing, right? It's still blind. So you just say like, so a lot of people just have a list of the different journals, and like Paul, like Josh said, sometimes you enumerate how many times you do that, and I do because I've reviewed for a ton of journals once, and there's a handful where I've done it like more than 10 times. And so I was like, the math. So yeah. And also there's now a service through Publons, I think, where they sort of like, it's linked to your ORCID ID, where they record how many papers you've published, but also how many reviews you've done and for what journals, as a way of sort of professionalizing and trying to give some kind of credit to that free labor. It's like not very specific, but yes, reviewing does go on your CV. So Sam, if you look at my CV, I have a different section for manuscripts, like books, for articles, for grants, and for conferences. But I have those sections because I've done so much reviewing. But you can squish them until you have enough. I would say at least 3 in each category before you break them out. Yeah. 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 And none of you should review for a grant before you've gotten a grant. So just saying no. You shouldn't review a book until you've written a book. You shouldn't review articles until you've published an article or 2. Yeah. Anything else? All right. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you for coming.